We're back, everybody. We're back.
We're back, and we got a great interview coming up with Shane Joseph, who is an author. Oh, he's a publisher too, but we're not going to talk about that today, Shane, because you're quite prolific, right? How many books? And these are novels we're talking about, right?
Yes, well, I have published 6 novels of my own and 3 collections of short stories, and I have quite a few still in the bag, waiting to be born, if you will. So yes, I have been writing a fair amount over the last 20 years.
Well, I think we were talking about, at least with a lot of authors, this has been a great time for writers, because they're locked in their house and they got nothing better to do than write their next book.
They can't have writer's block. But Shane, where are you from? Are you born here?
No, I'm actually from one of the islands like yourself. I was born in Ceylon, which is now called Sri Lanka. It's an old British colony. It was a Dutch colony and then a Portuguese colony before that. So
we're hearing the accent, so I was wondering.
Yeah, they always get mixed up with my accent. It's a sort of a hybrid of many, many countries.
Well, yeah. Well, and we won't get into why you may have chosen Coburg, because my family settled in Coburg at one point too. But
did you?
Then they moved down to Niagara. But anyways,
is there any place that your family did settle? His family settled everywhere.
I don't know where she's getting this stuff. Okay, Shane.
Anyways, we're here to make this lively.
Yeah. But so the new book's called Circles in the Spiral. Do you want to hold it up for us? And then I really want to dive deep into what this book is all about, because it's a very topical book.
It's got a hand.
Yes. So let me explain this one. This is a rather unique one for me, because I normally write books and I let them marinate for years, put them through various drafts, and usually it takes about 5 to 7 years before a book I've written gets published. But this particular book was written last year. I had suffered an illness. I had been in the hospital for a while. I got back with a serious situation, so I got back with a new perspective on life. And I decided that I was going to face some of the issues facing writers today. One of the things that was happening at the time was we were being boxed into corners and not allowed to write about things. There was the Me Too movement that was making a lot of noise. There was the gender issues that were on the table. There was the Black Lives Matter came later, but it was there. And there was the issue of fake news that was penetrating the airways. And we were scared to write about anything other than ourselves. And I said, that's not right, because as writers, and especially fiction writers, you need to span a broad canvas. Your characters come from everywhere. They can be black, white, men, women, anywhere on the gender spectrum. If they fit the role and if you want to tell a story about them, then they need to be in your book. So I decided to break all the fetters and just write a story of contemporary times. And I threw in a lot of these characters from different backgrounds into the book. I did my research. I had an editor check some of the things that I was not very sure about. And I think what I have here now is a book that reflects the times. So it's a story about a writer who's suffering from writer's block. Believe it or not, we do suffer from that from time to time. And he's involved. He's being drawn into a plot to sabotage the Canadian federal government election, which happened last year. So I was writing it last year. I went on the premise of, if they can do it in the United States in 2016, they can do it here. And I think they've got 3 years to figure out how to perfect it, to patent it, and to market it to other countries that want to do the same thing. So I said, what happened if it happened in Canada? It probably did, and I'm not sure if people talked about it. There were hints about it in the newspapers. But what happened if it did? So that was the premise. And so I brought in this blocked writer who has been hired as a blogger, and then he gets drawn into this plot. But he's going through his own problems, which is another feature of Canadian life. We have a lot of family dysfunction in this country, even though we are such a prosperous country. There is abuse and there's neglect, which leads to more abuse and neglect down the generations. So he's a writer who's also suffered some abuse. He has in turn abused and neglected people, which is his way of escaping. That's why he writes books. And I threw that into the situation of this fake news plot, just to see how all these things would gel and make a rollicking good story, which I hope it is. I know the first few readers who have read it have found it difficult to put down, but that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to talk about what exists today and just let it hang out.
Yeah. So, do you have a question, DBoss? Well, I want to dive into the whole fake news aspect of the book, because was that even an issue last year in 2019?
Oh, it was an issue since 2016, since it came out that it had been that the Russians, they said, had interfered in the U.S. election, right? So and there was talk that they were possibly trying to interfere in the Canadian election. Now, nobody talked about whether they did or not, but did they? That's the question.
Well, that's a great, but okay. So what's your take on the whole fake news? Because I mean, we're starting to feel it. Every time we publish a video onto YouTube or even try to even say, just say what people think on Facebook. I mean, it's getting blocked. It seems to me to be a very serious issue.
So we have two things here. I find fake news is destructive to society, right? Because you don't know what is the truth anymore. Everybody is right. And so that's the first thing. And then given that we have social media that is so pervasive now, and this culture of everyone wanting to be famous, everyone wanting to have a following, it makes it very easy for fake news to permeate society. So my take is, if you are sharing and posting things on Facebook, for example, or Twitter or whatever, just make sure you check your sources. Because the story might sound very interesting and actually quite fantastical, which would probably get you a lot of likes and a lot of followers. But is the story real? And are you actually doing damage to people's perceptions by sharing and propagating something that is not correct? So that's what has happened. We have a group of people manufacturing fake news for an intended purpose, and we have a channel now, or several channels. And we have a very gullible audience who are willing to use those channels to further help these guys propagate their fake news. And so it's a destructive cycle. It just helps to distort the truth. And after a while, people just tune out. They don't want to read this stuff anymore because they don't trust anybody. They don't even trust the newspapers and the regular channels. I mean, right now, we hear about the media is being vilified and cast as villains. And is that true? Or are they suffering the effects of fake news that is circulating around them through all these other sources?
It's a great question, because it does seem that way. It just seems that there's so much information out there. It's almost like you can, like if you're just for example, right? If you're a Trump supporter, you live in a bubble where all the information that you get supports your existing point of view. Yeah. And if you're a Trump hater, you live in another bubble, where all the information you get supports your point of view. And maybe that's one of the reasons why politics is so polarized in the U.S. and seemingly getting polarized everywhere else as well.
Yeah, and it's the same thing in social media too, right? I mean, if you have followers, they all are expected to understand and accept your point of view. And if you have dissenters, then it's very easy to, with the click of a button, to unfriend them.
Exactly.
So we create our own little silos. All the people who like us are in our friends list, and all the people who hate us in somebody else's friend list, and the silos continue. So yeah, it's an insidious cycle. And that's also why I call it the circles in the spiral, because a lot of the themes I have in this book, fake news being one, the dysfunctional lives, which starts with abuse or neglect, goes into fantasy, goes into blocks, creative or emotional blocks, leading to fantasizing and acting out fantasies that can lead to further abuse. And so it's a vicious cycle. I also in this book try to deal with second chances, because that's a theme that has occurred through most of my books in the past. I think everybody deserves a second chance. I've had many. And usually, a second chance to me means you're starting again from ground zero. right? Everything that you had in the past is gone.
Mm.
You're starting again fresh. And it's happened to me many times in my life. I've immigrated twice. Every time I left and went to a new country, I started with nothing or with very little. I remember I went off to Dubai, so many years ago. I went with a suitcase, 50 English pounds in my pocket, and a guitar. And that's how I started. I came to Canada. I had, 2 sick children and my wife, and we checked into a hotel and started life. We knew nobody here. Luckily, it was summertime and we were able to get around. But, you're starting from ground zero. Even recently, I mean, we had the pandemic and I had a business that was thriving and doing extremely well. And we had to shut it down. So now we're starting again from ground zero. And so that business of second chances plays a lot in this book. My narrator, the guy, the blocked writer who's writing the story, he's as much as he's drawn into the plot around the Canadian government fake news thing, he's also getting a chance to relive his previous relationship that he had with which went south and ended tragically. He has a new chance a second chance to remake that relationship again. And so that's his second chance. And several of the people in the book get second chances to make it. Some do and some don't. Because we don't always do well on the second chance. They say to err is human, to repeat it is folly, so you don't repeat it, and to keep repeating it is mania, right? So we hope that these people who get the second chance will do something with it and do better.
Yeah, I love the second chance. I've had the chance myself. But sometimes I don't want to do that anymore. Shane, you get a point in life where you don't want. It's okay. I'll go with this one. DBoss.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you something about your book, Shane.
Yes.
Why do you have different mothers? Is it in the book or different from different? Is it different mothers?
Well, it's different from your other books, eh, Shane? Like, how is it different?
Yeah.
From the books that you're normally writing.
Right. So as I mentioned, this is the first time a book has been written just a year ago, and I published it. So it's fairly fresh. It's the most recent book I've written. It's also written entirely in the first person. I normally don't write in the first person because it's a very narrow lens to view a book. And I have usually about 3 or 4 different viewpoints. But this one was carried entirely by the narrator, the blocked author, because I felt he had the best perspective on the whole thing. He's the hero, and he's the victim, and he's the person to whom everything is happening. So I had him as the person, and then also given his past and his traumatic life he's had, he's a rather unreliable narrator, and that's a device that's used usually in literature, where you have an unreliable narrator who's telling you a story that is not quite true, which sort of layers onto this whole business of fake news. He's in a fake news cycle. He's telling us a story that has some elements of fake news in it too. And then you have to sort of figure out what is the truth, which starts to come out towards the end. I mean, as he heals himself and he's able to uncover the blocks that have dogged him all his life and cure himself, the real truth starts to come out. And we start to see, oh my gosh, what he told us at the beginning is not quite right. This is exactly what happened. And so that unraveling, which also creates a sense of tension and drama in a book. It's almost like a whodunit or why he done it. So that element plays out in the book, and so that's why I think this book is different, because my other books have been on with multiple viewpoints and with time lapses and so on. This book goes from start right to finish. Those are some of the differences.
Okay, well, Shane, what inspired you to write this novel? Like, I know that you're talking about a different life changes and stuff, but what made you say, okay, you know what, I am going to write this Circles in the Spiral? How did that come about? How did that thought process come about?
It was more to actually reclaim, as I said earlier, to reclaim my artistic freedom. I think a lot of writers in this country and elsewhere are not respected for their viewpoints. A lot of writers have been forced in order to make their living, to write what their bosses tell them to write. They are either hired out to a newspaper or a fake news channel or whatever, to a blog, and then they write what's given to them. Even successful writers are given scripts that they have to stick to. I don't have those constraints because I have an independent source of income, and I don't rely on being an author to earn a living. So I'm using my writer's pen, if you will, to write what matters to me, what matters in the world according to me. And so I don't really intend to make to please anybody, right? Any particular vested interest. I see it the way I see it. So this was my attempt at this particular time, which was rather unfortunate, because with all these political forces that were raising their heads, and different camps raising their heads, writers were worried that they would tread on somebody's toes and cause a problem. So people being very careful about what they wrote. And I said to myself, no, that's not right. Literature is open; it's an open field. We need to write what we know, what we want to explore, and we should reclaim that freedom.
I mean, that sounds like a great endorsement all on its own. The fact that you are able to express yourself totally freely in the book. That you don't have the constraints that some other authors might suffer and have to constrain their message to fit a certain party line or somebody else's idea of it. Now,
I remember when I first came to Canada, this is probably pertains to people who are immigrants to this country. When I first landed here, and my two children were sick, and we were living in a small apartment, but I went walking down the street, and I wrote a letter to my dad, who was living back in Sri Lanka at the time. And I said to him, Dad, there's one thing that I can smell very clearly and succinctly in this country, and that is the freedom. And I bet you that people who are born here do not smell that, because they're born in it.
Yeah.
And I come from places that have had lots of persecution and political unrest and artistic strangleholds, and out here I could see the freedom, I could smell the freedom. And that's something that we should not lose, because that's one of the benefits of living in this country.
Well, it's great to remind us of that, because, I think you might be right. The people who are born here might not see that, because they're kind of stuck in the middle of it. They just don't have the context to juxtapose, that with. Now, I know you want to read a little bit from the book. We don't have a lot of time. We got about 5 minutes left, Shane, but we would love to hear a passage from the book if you can.
Yeah, I'll read from the opening. The book starts here with the writer who's in his...
See, this is it. This is the beginning. For people watching this, you're already starting to read the book right now.
Right. So here it is, chapter 1. Will Smallwood is the author, and he's having a tough time right now. I flung the squeeze ball at the wall and watched it rebound onto the floor, bounce once and roll under the sofa like the story of my life. Damn, this plot wasn't working. It was more of the same. Give me something fresh, my agent Sam had said. Sales are flagging. So was my life. All fiction is contrivance. Didn't Sam get it? It's about tossing a bunch of possibilities in the air and threading through them to a satisfactory conclusion before they hit the floor. But after a while, like a sleepwalker, we trace our steps over familiar routes because they are comfortable footpaths. Did I know what went through the Viscount's mind when he removed the lady's garter? We know what is around the next corner. We know when a new twist is overdue, and we know how to tie all those loose ends we planted deliberately, but we don't know why. We lack depth when the age we are depicting is not our own, and when we project our own sensibilities on another time. It wasn't working anymore. My agent was right. And in the meantime, younger writers were inventing newer forms. Mythopia, Cli-Fi, Bizarro, Interactive, Fanfic, Grandlit, Autofic. My traditional historical adventure story was dated. I had no answer. All I had were bad dreams. Oh, but that's for later. Write about your own life, Susan had urged me one day when I was stuck on one of those doomsday spirals. She had been reading too much Knausgaard. My achieve nothing life? I countered. Oh, what's so exciting about that? Nah. Now, I went looking for my squeezy. My back ached as I grabbed the fuzzy ball from under the sofa where it had rolled next to an old baseball cap that had gone missing weeks ago. I felt a crick and a stab of pain. I couldn't rise. Darn! The damned back had gone again. I squeezed the ball to transfer my pain to it and rolled over into a supine position. From there, I surveyed the cobwebs on the ceiling I should have cleaned out weeks ago as the pain traveled down my back and into my legs. Too much stacking of produce at the grocery store, my part-time job. That was the reason for the back to go. Recently, I had been working more shifts to cover my cash flow requirements. I must have lain there for an hour before the pain eased sufficiently to allow me to limp back to my desk. Pulling myself into the chair, I stared at my unfinished novel. 5 chapters in and 25 more to go if I were to follow my tried and true recipe. But this time, I knew I was never going to finish this sucker. I did not want to finish this sucker. I was sick of the formula. Readers were sick of the formula. Working the night shift at the factory and the day shift at the grocery store loomed as the only way to feed myself and pay the bills, since Susan had departed with the accountant. Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, we had some great jokes there, Shane. We got to find out what's going on with that accountant now. And Susan, I got so many questions. We're going to have to get the book. Do you want to just hold it up again so people know what they're looking for when they go to the bookstore? It's called Circles in the Spiral by Shane Joseph. And what's the best way for people to get the book?
So the book is available through Amazon.com. It's available as a paper book, and it's available as a Kindle, also on Kobo as a EPUB ebook. You can also order the book through regular bookstores. It may not be racked in the bookstores, but you can order it and they will deliver it, because I distribute this book through Ingram, which is a worldwide distributor. And so, yeah, this book is available anywhere good books are available, is what I say. All
right. Okay, Shane.
Okay.
A good book for these times. Lots of themes, interweaving themes, talking about fake news and the whole. Probably a great book for writers, especially the ones that are maybe having a little bit of writer's block. So, Shane, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for coming.
Always great to see you. Best of luck, and we'll have to get you back on the show when the next book is ready.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Shane.
Okay, thanks, Shane.
All right. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with
Mr. Creep.
Mr. Creep on Talk It Out with Chill and DJ Despair.
You are watching CaribVision. How I